The future where Boruto defeats Jura is one where he has the Jougan, and that is the future that Kashin Koji is trying to lead us towards. I have made two claims, and both of those claims will be justified in this video. As the best way to describe what is going on between the Senju and those who are fighting to protect this world is a chess game. And if you ask me if I am a chess genius, the answer I would give you is no. But I'm 100% sure that there are a couple timelines that Kashin Koji has seen in which I am a chess genius. So based on those alternate timelines, we'll be conducting this video. But jokes aside, we can analyze this as a chess game due to the simple fact that the further along the game we go, the more our pawns are being pushed towards the opposite side of the chessboard, the more likely it is for a queen to emerge. And that queen is Boruto, ultimately awakening the Jougan. And the reason why I view it in such a manner is due to the simple fact that the whole tactical plan from Kashin Koji at the current moment, ever since we figured out about the Senju, has been a stalling game to make this game longer and longer. If you view Boruto's training methods, you would see that it goes along with this idea. One where Boruto ends up learning future abilities that Boruto in the future used to survive against the Senju, to survive against Code, to survive against the Leaf, to survive against Kawaki, using those abilities that have allowed him to survive. The current Boruto that we have now learned those abilities, which now means that the current Boruto will survive even longer, allowing more future updates to occur where Boruto can pick up and learn more abilities. This is what allows Boruto to become stronger and stronger as time progresses. And the reason why Kashin Koji wants Boruto to survive for so long is so that Boruto can eventually reach the point in the timeline where Boruto ends up awakening the Jougan. The more Boruto survives, the higher the likelihood of Boruto awakening the Jougan, where he can then end up defeating the Senju, especially Jura. As Boruto has quoted multiple times that now is not the moment, they are nowhere near Jura's strength. But Boruto seems to know that eventually they will reach it, or eventually they are going to catch Jura off guard. The reason why Boruto may not have the full information revealed to himself is just like what Kashin Koji said. The more you know about the future, the more you change it. If Kashin Koji tells Boruto that he will awaken the Jougan at said moment, Boruto will ultimately end up changing that future, and perhaps will never awaken the Jougan, ultimately destroying a future that Kashin Koji saw as a genuine possibility. So now we have to justify why I believe the Jougan is what will allow Boruto to defeat Jura. The first answer lies in the choice that Kashin Koji made. Why did Kashin Koji choose Boruto over Kawaki? Obviously, the way in which Kashin Koji is affected with omnipotence is minimal due to the simple fact that he can simply see the timeline and know exactly what happened, so the effects of omnipotence, although they are present, they are still minimal compared to everybody else on the planet due to his ability. So the fact that we have a Kashin Koji that chose Boruto instead of Kawaki, if it was an ability that Boruto could have been taught, an ability that he can learn in the future and then defeat Jura, then it would have been possible for Kawaki to be part of their plans. As we clearly know that for Kashin Koji, Kawaki is not necessarily needed in this plan to work, as Kashin Koji never knew that Boruto had talked to Kawaki, which meant that with Kashin Koji's plan, his entire plan relied on Boruto. And if it relied solely on Boruto, and he believed that Kawaki could play no hand in part, it means that there is a power that only Boruto can awaken, and that power would have to be the Jougan. The same eye that countless of Otsuzukis have seen and have already warned Boruto about how troublesome that eye is, Boruto is one of the only people who have strongly inherited the powers of the Byakugan, as stated by Momoshiki. And the reason why this is important, and the reason why I say Byakugan, is because the Byakugan's powers are heavily linked with the Otsutsuki, so it can be used interchangeably when discussing the powers and genetics that Boruto has awakened, as we clearly know with Hamura and Hagoromo, Naruto and Hinata. So now, what this actually proves is that Boruto has something inside of him that only he has, nobody else has on the planet, that allows him to be a factor as to why Kashin Koji picked him out of everybody else. This is not only due to the fact that he is the MC, as obviously Boruto is the MC, and that's why he has all these different advantages that may cause him to be the person to defeat Jura, but the one thing that we have proven right now is that somewhere in Boruto lies the potential to defeat Jura. We haven't yet proven that that potential is the Jougan. It could be another ability that only Boruto can have. But the reason why I would go in depth and say that it is the Jougan out of everything else that it could be is due to Boruto's destiny. And we have a quote by Jura himself that aligns perfectly with Boruto's destiny and is foreshadowing everything that we are seeing happening right now. The first thing that we did end up seeing Jura say after discussing exactly how the Senju came about. When we saw Boruto flee, we had Jura who told Boruto that flee wherever you would like to go, but know that no matter what, you can never escape your destiny. And when he says that, Boruto is currently fleeing against the Senju. Boruto is fleeing against him, which means that Boruto's destiny is tied with the destiny of Jura, which is very important to note. Now, why exactly is Boruto's destiny tied with Jura? Why is it the case? And the reason this is the case has been explained to us by Jura in the anime quite some time ago. And it's because of this. We have a Tonori who tells Boruto after he helps Boruto prematurely awaken the Jougan in the anime, he tells Boruto about his Jougan and how the Jougan is a star of hope against the calamities that will come to pass. This is a prophecy that Tonori gave Boruto before he was eventually turned to stone due to breaking the Otsutsuki rules by meddling with Boruto and helping him prematurely awaken the Jougan. And due to that being the case, Tonori is sealed in the anime for sure. But continuing on with that theory, it all rests upon the fact that Boruto is the one who will shoulder the fate of this world. It means that Boruto's actions are going to be the ones that will affect how the fate of the worlds end up going, for good or for bad, which ends up reinforcing what Jura ends up saying, how Boruto, even though he is fleeing right now, they are destined to clash. Why? Because as Kashin Koji said, the Senju will bring the end to this world. But Boruto is supposed to be the one to shoulder the fate of the world, thus they are bound to clash. With Kashin Koji, this also reinforces the idea that Kashin Koji had to pick Boruto, as with Tonori's prophecy, Boruto is the one who will shoulder the fate of the world. Just like what happened at the end of chapter 4, where Kashin Koji was yelling at Boruto, telling him that he could have destroyed the world, not necessarily due to an ability that he used, as we know that Boruto has planetary level abilities and far greater, but due to his actions, as his actions hold the fate of the world in his palms. And that's why Boruto and Jura have to clash, due to their destinies, one to bring the fate of the world to the end, and one to shoulder that fate, Jura and Boruto. Now, what Tonori said about what will allow Boruto to shoulder that weight is the Jougan, the Star of Hope. And that's what will allow Boruto to ultimately either resolve this problem or make it even worse. The things we could see with the Jougan could be pretty interesting. One could be of Boruto not being able to control it, going alongside how he's not able to control his Otsutsuki side, like he's not able to control Momoshiki, and this is something that he will have to deal with. or on the other side, it is an ability that guides Boruto, points to Boruto to find methods in which he can ultimately defeat Jura and warn him of different signs that is to come. There are multiple routes that the story could go. Now, something that everybody is going to point out, or at least those who don't believe the Jougan is canon, is the fact that, exactly, we haven't seen the Jougan in the manga. That is not necessarily the case, as we saw the Otsutsuki panel, which did have Jougan's presence, as we saw when it was also adapted in the anime, but I will definitely agree with the fact of one saying that the Jougan doesn't really appear in the same way that it appeared in the anime. And that is definitely true, but its canonicity still remains the same, as stated by multiple different people who work for Boruto, and some even stated by Ikemoto. The anime and manga may take different routes, but they will ultimately reach the same goal, so its canonicity is true, which would then mean that this story from Tonori, where Tonori prematurely awakens Boruto's Jougan, is something that could happen in the manga at a completely different stage, where for Boruto it happened in his childhood, but in the manga it could happen in an arc to come, or later on in the future, or maybe like we saw with Mitsuki. We don't really see it much in the manga, however the anime serves as the building blocks for points that will come into the story. So there are multiple different routes that we could see the Jougan come to be in the manga and the anime, but ultimately the manga and anime will cross and meet that same route and meet those same plot points, which means that the Jougan is canon and this part of Boruto's story, whether it happens now in the manga or it never happens in the manga and we rely on the anime's foundations, it still is canon and meaningful for the story. Now with this big answer that I've given you guys, we solve both issues. One of why the Jougan is needed to defeat Jura, and proving that Kashin Koji is waiting for this future to take place. That has been determined, and we can go a little bit deeper on the second question by analyzing what happens in chapter 15. In chapter 15, we have Kashin Koji's plan, which has been outlined. A simple plan of taking out the Senjus one by one, and whenever Jura comes, figuring out a way to run away until Jura is left alone, as Jura is the person who they do not know how to deal with at the current moment. Jura is supposed to be given the right to do anything in Konoha, which concerns books and his reading habits, but not to harm him, as if Jura gets angry right now, there is nothing that they can do. Which means that for the moment, there is nothing they can do, but they are hopefully going to reach a point in the future. If Boruto keeps on surviving, just like he told Sarada to do, that they're going to be able to take down Jura. So those are those two questions that are answered, and I really like the way this theory came out to be. However, there is one big problem in all of this, and it also goes back to the theory of the Jougan possibly being something that Boruto himself cannot control, due to him not even being able to control his Otsutsuki side through Momoshiki. And that is, will Boruto awaken the Jougan before he ends up controlling Momoshiki, or will Momoshiki take over before Boruto ever comes to master the Jougan? This is what I mean by this. Will it be a fact where Boruto ends up losing control and he ends up coming back using the Jougan and controlling his Otsutsuki side? Or is it that we have Boruto use the Jougan, and due to the fact that he hasn't yet mastered his Otsutsuki powers, Momoshiki is then able to take control and use the Jougan for himself where he ends up fighting? This would end up reinforcing the idea of the Jougan possibly being something that Boruto has to learn to control alongside controlling Momoshiki and potentially expelling him. Or if we go off the first idea that Boruto awakens the Jougan after he is controlled by Momoshiki, then it would mean that the Jougan would help serve as testament of Boruto defeating and understanding his Otsutsuki side. So which one exactly do you like and you would like to go with? I posed this very same question to my community, maybe worded a little bit differently, but here is the response that I ended up getting. So if you were to ask me my personal thoughts on what would happen first, I would give you an answer that is quite similar to this post by These Matters. This is a pretty long one, so I'll summarize the points, as a lot of the points that he does discuss in this post end up reflecting mine. So shout out again to These Matters. But this is what he essentially says. That first, there is a dynamic between Boruto and Momoshiki, where at the current moment, whenever Boruto uses the karma, he feels as if he's going to die. This is the one thing that we do know for sure when it comes to Momoshiki and Boruto as of right now. This, alongside the multiple different times when Momoshiki has taken over Boruto's body and basically wreaked havoc and ran on a rampage, causing Boruto to hurt people that he loves, he has a feeling within himself that he shouldn't use his Otsutsuki powers and that his Otsutsuki side is bad. If Boruto is to use the karma, as we do end up seeing in that flash forward scene of the first chapter, then it must mean that he finally confronted Momoshiki. And the way I see it taking place is similar to but different than what we've seen with Kurama, where with Kurama we had an inner battle between Naruto and Kurama, which ultimately led to Naruto befriending Kurama. However, in this case, I believe we have an inner battle between Momoshiki and Boruto. However, it will ultimately result in one of them taking control of Boruto's body and having it as theirs, one where Boruto could win and one where Momoshiki could win. And what I really like about this theory that ends up matching with my current belief is that Momoshiki will end up beating Boruto in that first inner battle, which will eventually lead to the prophecy that Momoshiki stated coming to be, where he will live as Boruto Otsutsuki for a certain period of time. And then what I believe will end up taking place is that Boruto will end up winning the battle between him and Momoshiki after a second try, where after then we would then see Boruto come back with the Jougan. And obviously I don't know exactly how the fight will take place, but the main premise of the fight and what we both agree on, as I can see from this post, is that Boruto has to accept his Otsutsuki side, not view it as bad or a weakness, but as his own identity, as Boruto since the very beginning has been influenced by the Otsutsukis, and this is something that he will understand and will end up accepting, leading to him awakening his true Otsutsuki power, which lies with the Jougan. So again, shout out to These Matters, because we do have a similar idea and stance when it comes to Boruto using the karma. The next comment that we'll be discussing is by Claudius. And he says Boruto and Momoshiki will have some sort of conversation first, then the Jougan. I don't think Boruto has a physical eye. There is nothing in that socket, as far as we know. The physical eye is Momoshiki, but it's a Byakugan. The flash forward sequence, I think that is the first time the Jougan is being activated. Only Momoshiki's Byakugan could make the Jougan, and that's the theory I have. And that is very interesting because there are core principles of this post that are simply true. The fact that Boruto's eye is in fact destroyed, and the only eye that we will now see from that eye until the Jougan ends up appearing will be Momoshiki's Byakugan, which makes things very interesting, as Boruto in a way will be amped by Momoshiki when he does end up coming back, as he will have the Byakugan active. And if Boruto does end up beating Momoshiki after they have their conversation or inner battle, I could see it being the case that Momoshiki's Byakugan turns into a Jougan, meaning that Boruto has control of his Otsutsuki powers. So I really like this thing that we see right here, and depending on how you could see it, I believe that it could end up being the case that the very first time that we see the Jougan, at least in the manga, apart from that flash forward scene, would be that of Boruto coming to fight Kawaki. So I do like this theory. The next theory is by SRT. He says Boruto is probably going to tell Momoshiki he'll have to let him have his body if he works with him to defeat Jura and the Senju, and Momoshiki will agree. This theory sounds pretty good and is something that I thought about. A deal between Momoshiki and Boruto, where Momoshiki ends up taking care of Jura, and ultimately Boruto says, okay, you help defeat this calamity and then you'll just have my body. As we do know that Boruto has the current stance that it doesn't matter if he dies as long as he does end up preventing the worst future from taking place and that the world is not destroyed. That is Boruto's goal. So if it means that he has to die, Boruto will die for it. However, the only issue that we would have is that Momoshiki would want to collect a chakra fruit from this planet. So what would guarantee that Momoshiki wouldn't just end up doing what Jura was supposed to do? So that's the only gripe I have, and the way their deal would be made, it would have to prove that Momoshiki would actually do so. Now, the last comment we're going to be discussing is by Lori Yagami, and this is something that I really want your opinion on. He says, Koji uses Reaper Death Seal to take Momoshiki's soul out of Boruto's body, leaving nothing but a pure karma to use as a weapon, plus the Jougan. Now this is very interesting because where exactly do you think the Death Reaper comes from? Because obviously a lot of the things concerning Boruto stems from Naruto and some of the mysteries that we do have, like Lord Jashin, who could be an Otsutsuki, and the Death Reaper, who I also believe could be Otsutsuki influence. He does have horns and he does look kind of pale like the Otsutsukis, but I won't lie and tell you that he looks exactly like the Otsutsuki. He does look a tad bit different. So is it like an Otsutsuki who, like Hagoromo, lives in a specific land, like the land of the dead, while Hagoromo lives in the pure lands? It could be something of the sort, but if it is an Otsutsuki, it would also be very intriguing if this is an Otsutsuki ability that they are able to use. So let me know what you guys think personally. Do you guys believe that the Death Reaper seal is a way in which they could deal with Momoshiki or not, and would end up leading to Boruto awakening the Jougan? And the most important question is, what do you guys think comes first? Momoshiki controlling Boruto's body, then Boruto comes back with the Jougan, or Boruto awakens the Jougan and then Momoshiki takes over Boruto's body. And that would be the plan that Momoshiki had orchestrated from the very beginning. And to figure out more about Momoshiki and his powers and potential plan, you have to make sure to watch this video right here, as I give an in-depth analysis of Momoshiki's abilities that you may not know.